Whether it's St. Patty's Day or any day of the year, this spin on a classic patty melt will be your new favorite sandwich. So this sandwich takes a twist on a classic patty melt by mixing corned beef with ground beef, then creating your patties. And I've got some Guinness braised onions, some marble rye, and an Irish cheese to top it off. So don't forget to subscribe right here for some more interesting techniques and recipes. So first things first, I'm going to move this ground beef over to the mixing bowl, because what we're going to do is we're going to take the corned beef and we're going to cut it into cubes. Then we'll process it here in the food processor to give it the consistency of ground beef. Then we'll mix them together. So what I have here is just a pound of a store-bought corned beef that I've rinsed of excess liquid because it's still kind of in some brine when you buy it. And I've patted it dry to get off any of that water that I rinsed it with. You get this really interesting color in corned beef from the brining process. So that's why it may look a little different than just a raw piece of beef brisket. So it is still in its raw form, but it has been corned or brined. You'll typically see this called corned beef brisket or possibly corned beef brisket flat. You do want to use the slightly leaner end because you already have some fat coming in from your ground beef. So we'll get this into the food processor. Now that I've got this corned beef all in here, I'm just going to pulse it. All right. So it's important for that corned beef to be fully chilled when it goes in. Too warm and it'll mush it up a little bit, so you want it nice and cold when you put it into that food processor. Go ahead and put that directly into our ground beef. So now we'll take this and thoroughly combine the two. The reason I don't use all corned beef in this is because it has been brined and slightly cured, so it's on its own it would almost be a little soggy. But by combining it 50-50 with ground beef, it has a better texture, more towards a classic hamburger patty, but 50% corned beef does add that flavor, and you'll definitely taste the corned beef in here. Now I'm going to get this chilled so that it's nice and cold when I go to form my patties and cook them, and then we'll start working on our onions. First thing I'll do is get the heat turned to a medium-high and add a tablespoon of butter. All right, now that the butter's all melted, we'll add in the onions. So I'm not fully caramelizing the onions. I'm just starting to cook them so they're a little bit tender, and then we'll add the Irish stout and let them simmer in that until it cooks down and glazes them. The onions have been sauteing for about 5 minutes. They started to develop a little color. I've stirred them occasionally just to make sure they haven't burnt. I turned the heat down to more of a medium-low because now I'm going to go in with the Guinness. And the reason I'm using Guinness is because A, it's a traditional Irish stout that we can find here in the States pretty easily, and B, it's got a nice rich flavor to it that I think creates a nice glaze on these onions. It doesn't really taste like a beer onion, it tastes like a stout onion. It's very distinctive. So now we're just going to let these onions slightly braise in this Guinness. As it reduces, it will get a little syrupy, and then I'll toss them again just to make sure I fully coat them in that Guinness. All right, so we can see that these onions have kind of got a syrupy glaze from that stout on them. They've gotten nice and soft. So it's time to get those off the heat to let them cool down just a little bit. And I'll go ahead and move my cast iron onto there because that's what I'll be cooking my sandwiches on. Now I'll grab the ground beef and corned beef mixture out of the fridge and make some patties. So because corned beef is in a brine or a cure, it takes on quite a bit of salt. So I don't salt these in this recipe, but if you find that you want a little more salt to your burger, you can always add a little bit, but I would use sparingly because of that brine. There's already quite a bit of salt going into that corned beef. The other tip I have with doing a patty melt is know the shape of your bread ahead of time. So this is a little more oval shape. So when I make my patties, I will make them a little more oval than just straight round, because that means that you'll have a little bit of that burger in every bite. And they will shrink up a little bit, so I suggest going a little bit bigger than the size of your bread. Now that we have all the patties made, we're going to go ahead and start cooking. Get a little canola oil in this pan just to prevent any sticking. And I'll get 2 patties in. So this recipe yields 6 patties, but depending on the size of your pan, you may need to work in batches. I prefer to have a pan that's a little too big rather than crowding it and not getting a good crust on your patty. Since I want these patties to have a little bit of bite, I'll season each one with a little bit of pepper. There are a lot of spices in the brine to corned beef, so again, I'm taking it easy on how much I'm seasoning the patties. So just like cooking any other hamburger patty, you're gonna look for a nice brown crust on the exterior, which will take around 3 minutes per side. So these patties have started to develop a nice crust on the one side, so I'll give them a quick flip. You can really see the pinkish hue that's coming out on that patty, and that's due to that corned beef being in there. I think these are good and ready, so I'll pull these out of the pan. Now these burgers are fully cooked at this point, but we're gonna put them back on when we melt the cheese and toast the bread. First thing I wanna do though, is I'm gonna take a paper towel and some tongs and wipe some of this excess oil and debris that might be left behind from cooking these. The other thing I'll do is I'll reduce the heat just a little bit because we wanna gently toast the bread. We don't want the bread to burn because then the cheese won't fully melt and you'll have the exterior that's a little overdone. So now I'll take these slices of rye and we're gonna butter the exterior of each slice. You want good coverage because that's really what's gonna cause your bread to toast. Now one side, I'm just gonna put Dijon on. So now on the opposite piece of bread, we'll put the slices of cheese. So this is a Kerrygold Irish cheddar. It's kind of like a white, sharp cheddar in a way. It's an aged cheese. It's just got a nice amount of funk to it without being too potent. So I'm definitely a fan of using this. Now we'll go into the skillet with the slices of bread. Now you want the buttered side down. That's where we're gonna be toasting it. So we'll move it like this to make sure we have enough room. And again, you're probably gonna have to work in batches. I'm gonna top the Dijon side with some of these onions. Now these stout braised onions are gonna have similar characteristics to caramelized onions, but they're gonna bring a little bit more flavor. And now while this is cooking, I'll just go ahead and put these patties right onto this onion side. The reason I'm putting it on this side is you don't wanna try and flip those onions onto your patty, you'll probably make a big mess. So you just let that cheese melt and then flip the cheesy side onto the patty. All right, so we've given these a little bit of time to let the cheese melt and rewarm those onions through. And now we'll put the top slice on and get ready to serve them. So don't worry about this dark part of the bread. That's just the pumpernickel in the marble rye. That's always gonna be dark because it's very dark to start with. So now let's slice into one of these. So you can see that gooey cheese. And again, that pinkness you see, it's because of that corned beef. It's gonna change the color of the meat a little bit, but it is fully cooked through. This is an awesome recipe to use when you see corned beef at the store and wanna try something a little different. So what's your favorite thing to cook for St. Patrick's Day? Let us know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.